everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. I will keep this intro quick. I am exhausted from picketing today. Did you know walking in the hot sun for hours tires you out, especially if you're holding a dog? Because where we were today at the picketing CBS at the Radford lot, you know it. The sidewalk is not very big, and Mabel, our dog, is not, let's say, the best on the leash. So we bring this wagon to put her in when we are picketing. By the way, it's a rider strike. If you haven't been paying attention, there's a rider strike going on, and the sidewalk was not big enough for the wagon, so we ended up having to carry our dog in the hot sun for hours. Very tiring. But I'll tell you what is not tiring: today's guest, because I think they're great, and that guest is Bobcat Goldthwait. And if you don't know who Bobcat is, you should, honestly. But if you don't know, I'm going to read you his bio right now. Originally from Syracuse, comedian and director, Bobcat Goldthwait's career is so full of hyphens that multi-hyphenate doesn't even scratch the surface. From acting in films like Police Academy and Scrooged, to directing TV for shows like Community and Jimmy Kimmel, to directing comedy specials for folks like Mark Maron or Patton Oswalt, to directing his own films like World's Greatest Dad and God Bless America. But since the start of his career, Bobcat has been a stand-up. His special with Dana Gould, Joyride, was released in 2021, and his latest album, Soldier for Christ, was just released at the end of April by Pretty Good Friends, which is Eugene Merman's label, and it is great. Highly recommended. I say it in this episode, unless I end up cutting it out, but I say, that Bobcat's career has changed as I have changed, and that, he was, like, say, Police Academy was on when I was a kid, so fan of his then, and then, fan of World's Greatest Dad, God Bless America, and as, his career changes. Same thing I was thinking, Mark Maron is also the same. Like, I watched short attention span theater when I was a kid, and then I got into his stand-up, and then I got into his podcast. So it was pretty thrilling to get to talk to Bobcat for a whole hour, and I think it's a really good chat, so I hope you enjoy it. And if you do, and this is your first episode of Beginnings, why not check out other episodes of Beginnings? I like to do a little recommended if you like here in the beginning of the show. If you like my talk with Bobcat, maybe you like my talk with, say, other stand-ups. I've had a ton on, including the very proprietor of Bobcat's stand-up label, Eugene Merman, has been on the show. Kyle Kinane, Hari Kondabolu, why Bobcat just directed his special. Who else? Aisha Tyler, Andy Kindler, Ron Funches, Roy Wood Jr., Ronnie Chang, Joe Firestone, Aisling B. So why not check out those episodes? If you like what you hear, why not subscribe to the show? I talk to people from all different walks of creative life. Writers, directors, comedians, musicians. You can find me on social media at Andy Beckerman. Coming up, I got a lot of great episodes. Joey Allison Sayers, wonderful cartoonist. One of my favorite newer indie rock bands, Half Gringa. That was a great talk. So stay tuned for those. But for now, let's talk to Bobcat. As a anxious and paranoid person, when I'm having a conversation with someone, I was like, oh, this is good. And then 20 minutes in, I start sweating because I'm like, what if something happens? That's that.
You should fly planes.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. I think that would, a low anxiety kind of thing.
Yeah. Bullfighting and maybe putting out oil fires. I'm just going to put that out there. That's what I would tell you to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I should just stop what I'm doing now and become a guidance counselor. I think that would be great.
You honestly, those are better things that were said to me than my actual guidance counselor, who tried to get me into to think that I was the elite. Now I come from Pennsylvania. I was a good student. I came from Pennsylvania, and just tried to
Right.
Now that I actually see those kind of like, I can glimpse those people who the actual lead are. I'm like, what were you thinking when you were telling me that I was like going to get into these like the higher parts of society?
Ivy League schools. Well, I was the anti-guidance counselor because I convinced Tom Kenny, who, by the way, was getting offered all these free rides at all these colleges, not to go to college. I was the devil. I was like, you don't need college. Run away with me, Peter Pan. I'm not Peter Pan, Pinocchio. I'd run away with Peter Pan too. Pinocchio couldn't fly.
Okay, so there's a lot of things I was thinking of when I knew I was going to talk to you. One of them was I was trying to like put myself in your place because I was reading some things where it was like at 15 you decided you wanted to do comedy, and I'm like very curious about that decision.
Yeah.
But I was also trying to put myself in your place where I'm like, okay, 15, it's like what, 1977, something around there.
Yeah. I got on alarm when I was 20. So if we go, and that was I think in 80. So but I actually decided when I was 9, because I was watching George Carlin on the Dinah Shore show, and he did his poem about hair. And I wasn't even laughing. I was more fascinated by it. And I said to my mom, I said, what does he do for a living? And she goes, that's what he does for a living. And at that point, I no longer wanted to be a veterinarian. It's like I'm gonna do that.
But so it was just George Carlin? Was that the like kind of like North Star for you? Because I like when coming from knowing that we had like somewhat similar, I don't think exactly, but somewhat similar backgrounds, it never occurred to me that this was a job until much later in my life.
Yeah, no, it turned out to be a job. When I was a kid, I liked comedies, be it the Marx Brothers and things like that. But I just thought being a comic was awesome. And then who's that?
This is Squee.
Hey, Squee.
Who, the minute I sit down at the computer, just wants me to scratch him, no matter if I'm writing or whatever I'm doing.
Well,
it's just...
Well, that would be Alice Cooper might join us. Purr. She loves it. It's a good thing we have headphones on when she hears a voice on a thing. But it was like then as I got older, it was Monty Python and Steve Martin and then Andy Kaufman. And I had been such a comedy fan as a kid that by the time Kaufman came around, it was like, I loved him because he was kind of making fun of the art form. And then I started making fun of it in my early act. And then I got booked as a headliner. And then I actually became the thing I was trying to parody.
Wait,
I ended up having.
Did that?
What?
You're saying it now, but like in the moment, did you actually like have that thought that like, oh, I'm not Andy Kaufman anymore. Now I am the thing that he was making fun of?
Yeah, because at that, I would do my character that people knew me for, and like on a show where there's 3 or 4 comics, and then this guy comes down and he's crying and he's reading a Dear John letter and he can't get a sentence out. That's funny. But then like an hour of that, Kaufman was brilliant because he would come out and he wasn't even making any words. And then he kept going. And then eventually, he's doing, now he can talk. And he would keep saying, this is the real me. And then eventually he's Elvis and this and wrestling and that. And it's like, for me, it was like I had this character and then I didn't have any other conceptual pieces. So it was more like, I couldn't do Elvis, later on I did Bono, but which is close to Elvis, but then,
our Elvis.
Our Elvis. Yeah. So I would just I started developing more material instead of just being relying on how weird my act was. And, that was strange for me because like I said, I was kind of making fun of stand-up when I started. It's not that I dislike stand-up. It's just that I really think everything's up for parody, and why not parody this, comedy's really indulgent. A comedian looks at a crowd and goes, you know what this room needs? It needs me up there. And everybody should be looking at me and listening to me and laughing and clapping. And they shouldn't do anything else. So I'm going to get really mad.
But was there like, like I think so. My wife's a stand-up, and I've seen her because we started dating when she was just doing like open mics or whatever, and I've seen her progress. And there was a moment where I saw her go from I'm just up on stage just saying what I want to it being now I'm deciding what I want to say on stage and crafting it, and like I know what, like, okay, I have an idea, this is my next hour or whatever, right? Like that.
Yeah.
Was that
yeah, like when you see someone develop their voice, and I mean, in me, it was pretty obvious I had a voice. No, but it's like, it's awesome when you see that, when someone goes from doing material to I had a really hard time doing longer sets. And there was a comedian in Boston named Steve Sweeney, and he was one of like the founders of the 80s comedy scene. And Steve said to me, he's like, Bobby, it's not the material. He goes, you're funny.
Right.
So just, stop memorizing every, don't memorize your act. Go up and just do it. And once he said that, I suddenly was doing longer sets and taking way more risks up there.
Did this feed into your life at all? Like the rest of your life? Like I'm very curious when I talk to people on the show about the interplay between their creative life and the rest of their lives.
It fed into my dating. I remember I was working at a restaurant, and there was these two waitresses that I kind of was flirting with, and I asked them to come to the show, and I get them in free, and then I come out in this persona, and they were disturbed, like like they didn't want anything to do with me. They asked me if I was on drugs. So, the thing about comics is like people always go, oh, well, like the number one thing people are looking for in a partner is a sense of humor, or they'll say women are looking for a guy with a sense of humor, but they don't want the other part of the comic, which is the self-loathing, self-destructive, narcissist side. It took me till my 30s to realize that that listening is okay. Now I'm doing an interview and I'm talking about myself, so I'm not listening, but it is weird. Like, there's so much power in listening because you connect with people on such a different level.
But what, like, going back to, again, when you were 9, or I mean, you can have any kind of fantasy of what you want to be when you're 9, but like when you're actually starting to decide what you want to do with your life.
Yeah.
I was reading about like your parents. It seems like you came from a kind of working class background.
Yeah, definitely. My mom worked at Sears. My dad was a sheet metal worker. Yeah.
How do you even I came from like a pretty like very solid center middle class background. And I was still like, right. You can't, my parents just like, you have to have a job that gives you health insurance. You can't just like,
right.
You can't follow whatever your whims are, your dreams are.
Well, there was 5 kids, so I was the last one. So it was more like, hey, well, good luck. I sold a guitar I owned and got on a Greyhound and went and lived illegally at Emerson College. And that's how I got started. I'm glad I moved to Boston instead of New York, so I could get on stage and I could bomb without people seeing me. And so I think that like the thing about comedy is like most people that are any good at it spend a phase of their life where it's all they think about, where it's all it's that's it. And unfortunately, I think that's what makes a good comedian. Later in life, I might go, well, you know what? I need to probably develop a personality. So like it was Stephen Wright when I was about 18 or 19 who told me that it was so important to have outside interests or you're going to be doing material that the audience can't relate to. And it's fascinating coming from Stephen because Stephen's material is so abstract and beautiful and weird. But even he knew the importance. He actually did have a life. Like he wasn't just a comic. He he was painting, he was into film, and you know, he just it wasn't he worked very hard, but he also worked hard on having a normal life.
Do you think that's something particular to comics of your generation? I only say that because I know Dana Gould has said similar things about his own life.
Dana always just says if you met him before 30, he's sorry. Which is true. I did meet him then, and he was punishing. And now he's one of my best friends. But I don't know. I mean, you could, you know, I mean, there was that period where the Beatles were, all they did was write songs and hang out and do a million shows. So, you know, I think I like to think of myself, compare myself to the Beatles. No, I think,
why not?
No, but I think everybody that achieves anything is usually obsessed with it, you know, and fortunately, it makes us insufferable to an extent when you first start, I think.
Okay, let me amend this. I was going to say, like, I think it's something about maybe your 20s, because it popped into my head. So I came up through UCB, and I remember, like, one of my early teachers was like, you guys have, like, sitting us down and be like, you have to have, your scenes are going to be the most boring scenes in the world if you do not have a life outside of this.
Oh, cool.
If all you're doing is this.
It's comedy.
Be the worst improvisers in the world.
Right. That's true. That's a smart teacher. Who was that?
What's his name? He's a writer now on Stranger Things. I forget his name.
Oh, awesome. Good for him.
But so maybe it's more of a thing of like, if you start to do comedy earlier in your life, then it just becomes.
That's true, because like those people that make a decision later in life, I'm going to try comedy, they're probably a little bit more adjusted, but I don't know. It sounds like I'm bashing comics. I should just speak for myself, you know, but it you know, I'm happy that I have outside interests, and even if my outside interests have to do with show business, you know, I am a comedian. I'll always be a comic. There's a lot of people that don't know that about me. They only know me from Police Academy or whatever. But I'm a comic first. But you know, I get to write movies, and sometimes I direct those movies I write, and then I do people's specials, and I work on other people's TV shows. So, I'm super grateful that I've gotten a chance to do a whole bunch of things in that. I have to say, you know, I'm promoting the album, and I'm glad folks like the album.
Yeah, it's really good.
Thanks, man. But it's also weird. I at this phase of my life, I think I'm reluctantly in show business, and I'm saying I don't mean that I resent it. But it's easier when I have a movie to talk about the movie, and I can talk about the idea behind it, and I can talk about the people in it and the people that made it. But when it's just promoting my album, it's just like, you know, it's like, I'm pretty amazing, right? I did it, you know. So it feels like I've just been eating a chocolate cake and I'm about to throw up.
Is it really like that it's something I've learned, to just break in parenthetically to this question. It's something I've had to learn over the last couple years, where I'm like, it's okay to be proud of the things I've made. I don't have to be an asshole about it, but I can be like, I can be like, yes, no, this album I made, I'm actually proud of it. And because I used to be very self-deprecating, and I would just be like, oh, you should look at this thing. Or I wouldn't even say that. I would just like put something out there and then just like shy away from it.
And I think it is important to like the thing you made. What I do like about the album was I didn't want to go up on stage. There's some material that's old and stuff that I've done before, but there's a lot of stuff and a lot of stories and a lot of things that I've never done on stage before. And I wanted to capture those nights where I get off stage and I go, oh man, that was a lot of fun. And I wanted to capture that. Hopefully the audience gets it, you know, that some of these things I never spoke of, or put them in that way, you know, and it's cool. I mean, I don't know if that, you know, I hope that works for people, but it's kind of where I'm at as a 60-year-old guy that's been doing stand-up for 45 years, you know?
Yeah. Well, this is the other thing I was thinking of. I want to go back to some of like your life growing up and how that kind of led to this. But this is another thing I was thinking of was how your career has changed. And this is very narcissistic of me to say this, but like, as I've grown up, like, I mean, I just remember like loving Hot to Trot as a kid, and then Nirvana, and then your film, like as an adult, your films and your stand up. Right. And it is just, it is interesting to me how that has changed. Yeah. And I don't have a question, but I just I just found it like listening to your album. I was like thinking about that.
Well, that's cool. And thanks. You know, it's like, as someone who makes stuff, I feel I'd probably make a better living as a comic if I delivered the nostalgia act that people are expecting. But I've never been interested in that. I've always been interested in, and it's indulgent, but to do what I find interesting. Do you know what I mean? It's like the Who, which is, one of my favorite bands, they had hit singles, but if they weren't pushing themselves, they never would have done Tommy, and they would have never ended up with like Who's Next, or I mean, it just the artists that I liked, they were always changing too, and I think it's a little dangerous because like every movie I make is different from the other ones, and I'm not flattering myself. That's the goal, is like, okay, I want to see if I can do a scary Bigfoot movie. I want to see if I can do a suspenseful movie. I want to see if I could do, each time out, in fact, the last movie I wrote that I'm hopefully going to go make when the strike's over is I wrote a children's film, because that was the most terrifying thing I could think of, to not be snarky. Could I make a movie that wasn't snarky? And I also thought the biggest challenge during the pandemic and the way our world is right now, the biggest challenge was to make a hopeful film. Now, it doesn't mean I have hope,
yeah.
but I want to, and I think people that make movies try to do a version of the world the way they wish it was. Yeah.
Is that something you've come to as an adult? Did you always want, like, I'm curious, like, where that, because I don't know if I can embody anything I write that isn't in me already. Does that make sense? Like, I don't have hope, and I don't write things that have any kind of hope.
Yeah, but I think I kind of always had this thing, and Tom Kenny talks about it, like I was just always thought nothing was impossible, and we're going to be comics, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and I've just always had that in me, and I wasn't really worried about what other people were thinking. I was just going to do it, and it's interesting, like when we were kids, I didn't realize I wanted to be a filmmaker, but I loved Mel Brooks. I loved his movies. I loved his albums. I loved when he went on a talk show and he would just tear it up. He'd be running around. He'd be performing. And I also knew he was the guy that wrote The Producers. I also knew that he was the guy that made and directed Young Frankenstein. So I knew this is what he did. I didn't realize that's what I wanted to do. But even as a young guy, when I would look at the newspaper to see a movie. I didn't look at who was in it. I looked at who wrote and directed it. So I probably should have known much earlier that I was going to go in that direction. The same way when we were kids, Tom Kenny had a picture of Mel Blanc in his locker, and I should say who Tom Kenny is, because I keep mentioning him for the folks who don't know. He's been my best friend since I was 6 years old, but he's also the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants and actually hundreds of other characters.
Mr. Show.
And it's, Mr. Show, and Adventure Time. He's the Ice King, Cat Dog, Rocko's Modern Life. I mean, it goes on and on. And he did become our Mel Blanc. That's fascinating to me. I love the guy, and to, I'm only as good as a comedian is because I grew up with a guy who I think is one of the funniest people I've ever met. So bouncing off of him could only make you sharper, but I do wonder why both he and I were so fucking snide as kids. Like we both had, he was upper middle class, I was lower middle class, but we both had good lives, and we both, our lives weren't that hard, but we had all this angst, and it's pretty funny. When I said angst, it reminded me of when I was talking to Kurt Cobain once. He was saying the line, he said, teenage angst is paid off well, now I'm bored and old. And he just thought that was a funny joke. And he was like going, nobody gets me. Like that's well, it might be because he wasn't running around with a lampshade on his head, but it was funny too, because he'd always think it was funny. Like he'd go, like he'd take a picture and he'd go, did I smile? And I go, no. And he thought he was smiling.
Well, that's something also fascinating. Like, what happens when your art gets out of your own control? It becomes so big that now you're attracting people who you wouldn't want them to be your fans, but they are your fans. And
I definitely had that. And I definitely, even to this day, that's why I like to post something every once in a while that I know is going to annoy people that only know me from Police Academy or only know me from something. And it's okay. But Nirvana had that way crazy, where there would be like right wing hardcore punks that weren't into will come out to the show, or it'd be like broy guys who were the people they were making fun of. And I guess I've had that to an extent too. It's just the thing about, if you get, I've only had a tiny bit of it, but if you have mass popularity, you're going to be attracting the criminal element. No, but you're going to attract everybody. And the interesting thing is, like, I had mass appeal as a young man, and it didn't really, making a lot of money or having a lot of followers, as they say now, that was never the goal. I've always wanted to not have a day job, and kind of it's very indulgent, but kind of amuse me. Tom Kenny said I started making movies because I could no longer shock people with my act. They're there to be shocked. So I started making a movie and go, all right, well, how about if we do a rom-com with a tiny bit of bestiality? So it was like that gave me a whole new toolbox. I could still challenge people, but it wasn't just doing stand-up.
Is it just the Andy Kaufman thing? Like, by that I mean you idolizing him when you were younger, or is there what does it emotionally do for you to make people feel that? To
feel uncomfortable?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what that's about. I would like to make them laugh or get upset, but I like it. It's, I was talking to Robin Williams, was my buddy, and we were talking, and he said, we were at a restaurant, and he's kind of on and kind of keeping everybody in the restaurant amused. And I was like getting kind of annoyed. And I go, you got the job, man. The whole world thinks you're funny. I mean, the whole world. You're like one of the number one comedians in the whole world. And I go, my form of neuroses is I'm not concerned with everybody loving me, but I like them going, did you hear what the fuck Bobcat Goldthwait did? Did you hear what he fucking said? And then Robin's like, we were laughing because we decided that his form of neuroses was way more lucrative.
No, I get it, because I'm going to use my wife as she is more of the populist.
Right.
I am more of the I'm going to do my own thing in my little niche. And
right.
And I'm happy. I like whatever weird emotions I'm pulling out of people. That's it hits me in something. I don't know why.
Right.
But it just does.
But it's, and I don't mean to disparage. There's a lot of people that don't upset an audience that I still am like blown away by. Someone like Jim Gaffigan. I think he's I think he's brilliant. So it's not like it's just that my form is always, it's like uh, uh I heard Paul McCartney talking about what it was like writing a song with John Lennon. And Paul McCartney had written, it's getting better all the time. And then John goes, it couldn't get much worse. So I'm definitely the John Lennon to Tom Kenny's Paul McCartney, who's like, joy and laughter. And Robin was the same way, joy and laughter. And then I'm like sitting in the back going, oh, Jesus.
Do you think, okay, this is just something that struck me when you were talking about Tom before, but like, do you think you guys were able to kind of build your own, I don't have a good word for this, I'm going to say reality, that's not really what I mean, but in a world where like you don't know if it's possible to do this, but you both are kind of like juicing each other up, like right. I'm going to become Mel Blanc, I'm going to become Mel Brooks or whatever, right? Do you think that like in the absence of one of you, and I don't know how you could possibly answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Would you have done this?
I doubt very highly I would have gotten anywhere without Tom Kenny. And Tommy said the same thing. I kicked Tommy in the ass, but Tommy motivated me to be original. Tommy motivated me to write. No, there's no way I'd be where I am, which is fascinating. No one knows story better than Tommy because he, such a voracious. Is that the right word? He reads constantly, but he knows stories. Like I'll be making a movie or something, and then he'll give me a great idea. But it's interesting that I became the storyteller, and he's more a performer, but he's more than that because he creates people and things that don't exist out of nothing.
So what is it like about? You guys grew up in Syracuse, right?
Yeah.
What is it about Syracuse in the 70s? And you both go to Catholic school too, right?
Right. Yeah.
What is it about that kind of like, and I'm making up this as a question. You could tell me if it's accurate or not, that's the context and that's the pressures on you that push you both together as friends. And then kind of also are like, we want to get out of here to go do this other thing.
Well, it was great because it gave us something to rebel against. I mean, we weren't rebelling against the true horrific nature of the Catholic Church. We were just rebelling against having all this authority pushed on us. So it was a great place for that to create. And then, it's, before the internet, I don't think people understand how torturous it was to be a teenager. Before, like there is torture. You can't
fun when I was a kid.
Yeah. It's like, you can't see your friends. You can't communicate with them. Like if you call them in my house, there were 6 other people waiting to use the phone. And usually someone picked up the other line. It was just weird. If I wanted to talk and hang out with Tom Kenny, I rode my bike a few miles, it's just, it's not like, I'm just saying that you're cut off.
Right.
So, if it wasn't for like zines, believe it or not, I would have thought we were completely insane. But we get these zines that people made, and they liked the same music, and they liked the same shows and movies as we did, and we didn't feel so all alone. But that would show up at the local record store. Isn't that funny? And it's just, I'm not saying it's. I think it just fuels a lot of. Boredom. It makes you. It was like it felt like being a teenager felt like prison. Just like the shackles were on, and everybody was telling me that we don't know what we're doing and that we're stupid. And what I love about Gen Z is that they actually give me hope. They're going. Do you think in a few years the people that were raised with active shooter drills, the trauma of that are gonna fall in line?
Right.
I mean that I like when I go up like the Lincoln Lodge, when I go up and actually make people who didn't grow up on me laugh, that really makes me happy. And I love it when I can make them laugh, but at the same time, I'm not working in Harry Styles material and I'm not rapping or, you know what I mean? I'm not, I'm being
I don't know. A Harry Styles rap. Good work.
Yeah. Good work. But the fact that I'm just this cantankerous old man and they like that really makes me happy.
Well, I think again, it is this kind of like, as long as you've done it for so long, so you have the chops and you probably just go up and talk about anything at this point and still be funny, but also just like you are honest about things. And so that's going, like, it doesn't matter what generation you're talking to. If you're talking honestly about your life, people will respond.
Hopefully they'll connect. And then just to keep peeling it away, and for me, it was more, apparent that I was peeling away and exposing myself. I mean, that's the thing about this album. It is me, it's not, it's just me, it's as close as so far as I've gotten to showing the audience who I am.
Mm-hmm. When you were younger and you were pushing back, I was trying to figure out which came first, the kind of oppression in quotes of the Catholic Church or the like authority of the Catholic Church or Andy Kaufman. Cause I'm like, oh, if I had, cause I encountered Andy Kaufman in I was a kid in the 80s. Right. And when I encountered him, it was just like weird and fun. And I didn't get the kind of like what he was pushing back against. It was
what he was like, rebelling against. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just like watching like whatever, My Breakfast with Blassie or seeing like old SNL stuff. And I was just like, oh, this is really funny, but I don't think I got it. And there's something specific though to me, and that it seems, again, I'm putting this on you and I have no idea if it's true, that like there is this kind of like anti-authority thing in you. And I'm wondering if it starts with Catholicism or if you see it, people on TV pushing against stuff.
No, it was just always there. I mean, it was always there. I walked home from the first day of instructional league baseball. The coach started yelling at us and I just walked up and said, I don't want to participate in organized sports. And I was 6 and it was just, I was like, fuck this. And I walked home. So I just, it was always there. And I don't know why, I mean, even like, I made a post of it, but it's true. Like as a little kid, I would, be in a dress, and I wasn't really, I would never do like, camp. I would just wear a dress and be myself just because I knew it bothered people. And this is really like, I've got footage of me on Super 8 movies as a little boy dressed in a dress, bumming everybody out.
Bumming everyone out.
Yeah. Why is he dressed like that?
Is it okay? I'll throw this at you. And again, like most of this show, I will throw something at you and we'll see if it actually means anything or leads anywhere. But I'm wondering if there's something about being the youngest child of 5 where you're trying to get some kind of attention out of all of those. This is, again, armchair psychology. And
no, I think it's the direct opposite. I feel like, I was probably, I don't know where the anger came from because I actually had too much love and support. My sisters just thought I was amazing and took care of me because both parents worked. And, when I was like in 3rd or 4th grade, I remember my mother telling me I could be anything I wanted to be when I grew up. She didn't approve of my character. She didn't like it. She didn't like my act, but, that was her fault. She said I could, no. And I had a buddy say to me one day, I go, when my mom's gone now, but I go, I wonder why my mother really doesn't like what I do. And I thought like my mom didn't like me. And he said, no, you just don't understand. Your mom loves you so much. She thinks you should just walk out on stage and people would clap. She doesn't understand this dark, weird guy that you've created up there, and, no, so I wasn't like, and I also wasn't like that kid in the back of the classroom where I'm like, someday I'll be famous and I'll be popular. The sad reality of it is both Tom and I were really popular. we didn't really hang out with. We had our clique, which were the nerdy folks that like the same music and comedy and stuff. But we were friends with everybody, and we didn't have those. We didn't have those archetypal John Hughes characters in our school where, like, you know, the jock doesn't hang out with the nerd and the goth doesn't, you know, we kind of all hung out, and it's really disheartening when people find out I was the homecoming king. But I showed up drunk, so it was pretty good. The drunk
It is funny
king.
though. Like at my high school too, it was a lot more fluid. There were cliques, but you hung out with whoever you were friends with, and we had friends on the football team. We had friends in band. It wasn't just
yeah. There was no lines drawn, you know. And you know, if you know, when I unload on a heckler, I'm not very proud of it, but I don't ever bust that out. But I'm sure as a teen growing up, I didn't realize how vicious I could be. And I'm not saying that I was vicious all the time, but like when I went to, you know, I could take someone's knees out pretty hard. So I'm sure I was kind of nerd bully. I don't know what I would be, but you know, it was this thing, this anger that I think I've got a pretty good control on. But you know, every once in a while, it still will come out. But it's kind of like Dexter, how Dexter only uses murder. It's like, I only use it to shut up somebody that's ruining the show so the show continue for the rest of the people. I've taken me out of the equation. I'm like, all right, I'm going to use this superpower.
Yeah, you're a vigilante.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. But you know, I heard the best a story about some guy was doing crowd work, and the guy in the audience goes, he's like, tell a joke. I don't want to be on your shitty TikTok. That's pretty awesome.
Yep, that's comedy in 2023.
2023. It's and it always keeps changing. Do you know what I mean? Like 10, 15 years ago, is people were mad at the comedy world was mad at people who got famous off of YouTube, selling out places. And then before that, it was people getting mad at people who sold out places because they were popular on MySpace. So media is always going to change, and it's fascinating. But, you know, it's, you know, really fascinating because I just somebody just pulled up a clip to show me of a comedian who's clearly not in a comedy club, but it looks like he is, and he's got the mix and he's just doing jokes and he's destroying, but you just realize this guy's in his living room in front of a green screen, and it works. You know, he's just that close to AI comedy, and yeah, so it's the Wild West. You know, I'm glad I didn't have social media when I was a little kid, because right now there would be so much material that I would be apologizing for.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. There's the thing is that irony was huge in the 90s. So there was a ton of ironic stuff that doesn't play ironic now. Right. I am glad in some sense that doesn't, even though the intention at the time was we're making fun of the thing we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think I was thinking about the fact that, you know, I included 2 songs that Tom Kenny and I wrote when we were 15 years old, I think, in our bedroom. And I think it's really impressive that 2 15-year-old boys wrote 2 songs, and they're not song parodies, and there's no mentions of poop or boobs, which is kind of crazy for teenage boys to do.
Well, your bands were what? The Who? What else were you listening to at the time?
Kinks, Ramones, you know, it was sex. It was Sex Pistols. It was the band The Jam. You know, it was all these Elvis Costello, My Name Is True. You know, all these angry bands that we related to, and often they were English, which is even weirder. I don't know what, you know, in Central New York growing up. But Anarchy in the Mall, you know, right. Anarchy at the Orange Julius. So I don't know why we related to those bands, but we loved them.
Do you remember like an early time when you started to feel that anger? Was it in your life before you found like music that matched it, or do you think it was there and it emerged when you started listening to?
No, I think I think I was always trying to bottle it up, and then I think some of it was actually warranted, the things that I was rebelling against, but then I think other stuff didn't warrant it. But I just had this rage, which is so funny because, you know, I'm not angry. I maybe if I, you know, God knows what would have happened if I didn't find comedy. I might have been on a sniper on a roof. You know,
it's a valid thing in 21st century. Sure.
I really got to think that's possible, you know? So I had this vent, you know, it would have been much harder when I started comedy to go up there. It would have been so hard to come out and say, hi, good evening. And just bend myself and start talking about things like I do on the album. I couldn't get there because I had all this. I was nervous. I was angry, and that all makes sense that that's the persona that came out of me. I can't imagine it would have been more phony, even though people find that character so extreme, my earlier character. It would have been more phony for me to go up there and try to act sincere, you know. Thank you very much. It feels good to be here. No, it didn't. It didn't. Never did, you know.
Yeah. I mean, my little theory on this show is that, you know, you're born and you have your brain is set up in some kind of way, right? And then the things in your life are going to let something emerge or not, or push something down, right? A trait, like whatever, like being anti-authoritarian or something was maybe something that like, just, it was like however you were set up. And then there were a bunch of things in your life that were easy to rebel against. And so you're like, yes, okay, this is what.
Yeah. And I think it's like you know, the word bully became like it became something else. But I know that I did not like bullies, even though I might've been a little bit of one at some points. I didn't like bullies. And I guess I kind of thought there should be justice. And the anger started probably around the time I realized everybody was lying to me about Santa Claus. You know, I think that's probably when I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Everybody's in on this. I look like an asshole.
Do you ever see like your parents having to deal with shit like that is unjust or something where they are the ones who are in a position of lesser power? You know, again, I think like your dad, you said like sheet metal worker, right? And your mom worked at Sears.
But it's interesting. It's like, you know, my dad fought in World War II and he had a lot of PTSD, it would have been now called, but he was the life of the party, but he definitely had his fair share of demons, but he also did have this like a very big sense of right and wrong. So like he's trying to keep 7 people afloat, his union striking, and my dad would not cross the picket line. My dad, you know, we didn't know where we were going to eat, you know, and it would go on sometimes almost a whole year. And my dad, you know, so he had this sense of loyalty, a sense of justice, you know, so there's no way that didn't get ingrained in me, you know. Yeah, I think about that now with the WGA strike. You know, my dad was out there in Syracuse in the tundra with picket signs. So, yeah.
Are they from Syracuse or how do they end up there?
Yeah, Yeah, they're both from Syracuse. My mom's side of the family, both my grandparents are from Ireland on my mom's side. And then my dad lost his dad when he was 10. And so he had a large family, but he kind of was taking care of himself like by the time he was 13. So I never heard my dad complain about how rough he had it as a kid ever. And he really did have it rough. But I think also when you're 13 years old and you have a job and you quit high school so you can go to a job, it's hard to relate to your son who's staying up late watching SNL. listening to the Dickies, and there was no way in hell this guy could, here I am rebelling, being an anarchist, and this is a guy that was in the shit in the war and then had some kind of childhood that was out of Charles Dickens, and I'm like going, it's hard being me when so he couldn't express his feelings or connect with us, but now I see why. He wasn't, he was not Hugh Beaumont. It was not Leave It to Beaver, so he, I think all of us are doing the best we can despite the way we were raised, and I think that includes my father.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think I know you said your mom didn't get your act, but do you think they got you as a person?
My mother did, because my mother is the person that introduced me to Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman was on Dick Van Dyke Had a Summer series, and my mother called out. She goes, "Come in here. I think you're going to like this guy." And that's how I got familiar with Kaufman. So she had a sense of absurd comedy. She just, she didn't like for lack of a better words, the part of my act that would probably be considered punk or anti-establishment, as we're saying. She probably would have preferred if I was Andy, with like and The Man in the Moon. And I don't know how much of that's true, but when I saw that movie and Andy and his mom, it made me sob, because it dawned on me like, oh, it had to be hard for my mom, like, hearing about what I did last night or what I said or all these things. It actually didn't hit me until that movie, Man in the Moon.
Yeah. I ask a lot of this stuff because I don't think my parents, they first of all didn't really, they still do not understand this business at all. And they are very,
what did they do or did?
I mean, they're retired. My mom was an English teacher and my dad was a business person. I wish I had a better
it's just business.
He was, and then he during like the early 90s there was like a big recession, and his boss was an alcoholic and kind of like destroyed the business, so he took the opportunity to become an accountant, because I think he likes numbers. So he that I can say he later in my life he was an accountant,
because it's you can prove it. It's on the paper. It's tangible.
Yeah. Maybe there's something like that gives him like joy. You
can't argue with numbers, It's either it's what it is. Yeah. Although I had a buddy who was a really funny comedy writer named Martin Olson, and he's written a lot of things. And one day I was at a club and he sincerely was reading a math book and laughing. Like he found that much joy in it. I was like,
it was like a joyous laughter.
Yeah, and I was like, you're fucking insane, But he was being sincere. He just the absurdity of it.
I get it. I don't know if I would laugh. I used to teach logic. I was a philosophy professor before I moved to New York to do comedy, and I remember there being a satisfaction because logic's just like math with letters. And so I remember there being a satisfaction, but I don't remember ever like giggling.
Laughing at, no, he would just, he would lose his mind and just laugh. I think if my daughter or stepson wanted to get into comedy, I wouldn't discourage them, but I was like going, oh, I really wish you didn't have that hole in you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the void. I call it the void.
Yeah, because I would be like, you got to fill it with something else. I mean, it's great that I can connect with an audience and that people still come out to see me, but if you want to fill the void where, uh, am I a good person or do I have real friends? The only way you could do that is obviously by being a good friend,
Yeah, that's something that really, by like the second year of the pandemic, I started to really be like, all right, none of this stuff, like I would like, I'm not as accomplished as you, but like, I've made my living doing this stuff for a long time now. And like, I know like you would think that like doing something like selling a show or something like that or whatever would like fill in. You're like, oh, I did it like that. It would be gone.
It lasts for seconds.
Yeah.
The other, like a couple weeks ago, I found out that one of my screenplays that studios were interested in making it. And then I found out this other smaller movie it was a couple months ago. This other smaller movie got the green light. And my girlfriend comes in and I'm sitting by the fireplace with my head in my lap and like, I'm almost crying. And she's like, what's wrong? I go, they want to make my movies. What is wrong with me? It was just too much to take. I was overwhelmed,
Yeah. It's being overwhelmed by that stuff. And also, I don't know if it's for you, but for me, there's this kind of like, as long as there's no decision made and it's just kind of this amorphous thing that could become something or could not, I'm happy in that world.
Right.
But the minute I know one way or the other, then suddenly I have to actually have an emotion.
Well, for me, it was kind of like, especially with the one movie, it was like, it's very personal. It's kind of basically me as a 7-year-old. And to have people respond positively towards it made me go, wait, that's all I had to do? That thing I was running away from, so we'll see if I get to make it. But I honestly, when I write a screenplay, I don't picture it getting made. I really want to know I can hand it over to someone and they can read it and get it. And that's a big deal because when I first started writing screenplays, I was really bad at it and I didn't understand all of it. I didn't understand any of it. And there's some of my movies I think are flawed. I was like, oh, I should have done this, should have done that. But there's just like anything else, hopefully you get better as you keep doing it.
Yeah. When you said you were running away from it, like why were you running? Like, was it just the nervousness of showing yourself on stage or showing yourself in your work or something like that? Was it the nervousness? What is it that's like?
Well, it's exposing yourself to is terrifying because if I'm sitting in the back and I'm making fun of everything, then I don't have to. I've got a shield up. But if I put down the shield and I say this is really me, and then if you don't like that, if you don't like a bestiality comedy, that's because you're a prude and you don't get it. But if I just make a movie where I'm trying to tell a story without any of my tricks, to be that exposed is because if you don't like it, then you don't like me.
Even though you were the homecoming king, even though it's not like you were. It's not like you were like a wallflower when you were younger.
No, I was bigger than life. But it's like this album. I couldn't have done it any earlier, and it is very personal, and it's taken me all this time to be able to get up there and say, well, this is me, and this is really me. Especially some of the stories where I'm not. Didn't even have it in my head that I was going to tell that night. It's scary, and but I'm not interested in just doing the same thing. Now, like there's certain filmmakers who I adore and look up to, but they kind of still make the same movie, but they have their own tone and style and everything. I've yet to discover that with my movies because they're all different. And I think it would have built me an audience if I kept revisiting the same tone and the same theme. But maybe eventually I'll get there. But I don't pride myself on it. I'm just again, it's always, can I do this? That's what motivates me.
Well, I think that's what resonates with me, right? Is that you are just like, well, this is what interests me. I'm going to go do this. And that you aren't like, whatever, like not to be like, I don't know. I was going to say like I don't like The Departed. And I'm like, okay, so like there's a tone to all these films, but I'm like, I don't know if I cared about a film like,
right.
Is that Scorsese, right?
Yeah, but it's like, I'm making stuff on a selfish level because I'm trying to entertain myself first, which is really crazy. Getting the audience's approval is fine and great, and it's awesome when it happens, but that's not my first thing, which is really strange as a filmmaker, as a performer.
I get it. I 100% understand it.
Yeah. But there's other people like who I really admire that I think I would have jettisoned the character a long time ago if I didn't have this working class upbringing where I got to do the show that these people came to see. You know, I remember watching David Cross, and I remember watching him eat shit, but David Cross knew what he was doing was hilarious and he didn't give a shit. And I was like, you know, I wish I had those balls, you know, I mean, because eventually the audience did catch up to him, you know?
Yeah.
So maybe I'm entering my David Cross phase. I think it's the same beard.
Do you mind? We're right at the end. Do you mind if I ask one last question?
Sure.
I'm just curious, you know, in this emerging into yourself, was there something that changed for you in your life where you're like, the void, I need to fill up the void in some other way, and I need to be myself, or I'm grasping, but I'm like, I
don't know. I think the way the world got or my view of the world got so dark, I was willing to go up there and be myself because I just had all my sarcasm knocked out of me. You know, I can't be cynical anymore. I'm just looking for the other Starbelly Sneetches, you know. You know, there's a phenomenon, and I'm not exaggerating. It's usually Friday night, people get kicked out, and I don't kick them out. It's like the club kicks them out because I'm up there I'm being Cross, you know, I'm up doing what I want to do. And they're, look, man, in Louisville, second show Friday, they were not happy with that.
It sounds like Louisville.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I hear that. I think it's something like, as the world gets appreciably worse, it's tougher to just have that kind of like, again, I kind of like was formed in the 90s. It's kind of hard to have that ironic distance or that kind of like, oh, look at this stuff over here. And you're just like, no, this is fucked up. And I'm going to say why it's fucked up.
Yeah. I think that's why something like Ted Lasso works right now because, you know, The Office, I don't think necessarily would work versus, you know, which is a great show, but I'm just saying that what you're talking about, you know, being the irony and being removed and looking at the lens like, oh boy. And then that's a pretty big swing they did with Ted Lasso. They said, we're going to be sincere. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was the most outrageous thing you could do.
Yeah. And everyone needed it. Everyone, that's it at a particular time, everyone just needed something that felt real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks again for talking with me.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye, oh.